Hey, Candy.
Hey, Andrew, my friend.
I
How
am
you
so
doing?
glad to see you.
Always glad to see you.
So, you and Jeff and I are all going to be teaching this retreat up in Vermont called Accurate Touch in September. And I just thought it would be a great time for you and I to get together and talk about what we're going to do and why. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of Feldenkrais practitioners, we are trained in touch, and most of us have a pretty good sense of what we think we're doing when we're touching a client. But it also is full of difficulties and uncertainties and everything else. There's so much that happens before you touch a person that can make the difference between whether the touch you're deciding to use is useful or communicates. And then there's so much that can happen while you're touching. And there's obviously what happens after contact is made,
Mm-hmm.
after the lesson. And I thought we could just talk about those lanes, those different aspects of our work.
Yeah, I like it because, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
I have to go wash my hands first, though.
We'll come back. We'll start again.
Purify.
Let me go to my case of Purell in the corner.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we take a lot for granted about touch. And I think we're all trained slightly differently about what's important or what we should attend to in the touch.
Hmm.
I think it'll be interesting to find out from the people who are coming if that in fact is true. If there's something that we have in common, or if or what do we not have in common about our understanding of touch.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward not to it being a kind of a standard workshop, but to really have a small group of people that are high intent practitioners who really want to uh, get under the hood and really understand what are their assumptions about touch. Because I know I have mine, and I know that part of the impetus for doing a workshop like this with you was to get better at really reading my clients and understanding what I'm doing. And of course, not relying on the things I already know how to rely on, but to work on the areas of difficulty that I have in my own understanding of my practice.
Andrew, do you have areas of difficulty?
I have a long list.
Okay, name one.
Oh, I think we talked about this before in a conversation a couple of months ago, but I said, I was having difficulty working with, there were a couple of clients in my practice who I could see what one of their primary difficulties was, and it would coincide with the thing that they complained about, etc. But
Thankfully.
when I would go and touch that section of their ribs, or when I would go and touch that part of the back of their knee, or whatever it might have been, what I found was every idea I had, every strategy just kept colliding with the sensation of my hand and also the message in my mind, which was, this is never going to work. I could support this knee for 7 hours, and the response, or the reciprocal inhibition, or whatever strategic idea I had, I could see this is not going to work. I could support this person's head even more beautifully than I'm doing in the next 10 minutes. And then I would just persist in the strategies that I was maybe used to succeeding with. And so
Mm,
that was something that I'm very familiar with as a trouble spot.
right. So then I guess the question comes is, how do you know when to just give up and go somewhere else?
Hmm.
And then how do you know what to do next? So, that's kind of one of the things that I like to focus on with my kind of filtering through, sensing, thinking, feeling, acting. Like if I'm in that place, it's happened to me also just a little while ago, I confess.
Mm.
Now, I just want to say for me, like it's been a kind of a crazy day and a crazy few days. And in a way, talk about feeling in a way I've been rushed. Get this done, get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done. And now the client is here the new client is here and I've just raced from all the other things.
That's in the space too.
My cells are racing. My cells are racing. So I put my hands on this human being, and I have to wait. But my whole inner clock is that's enough. That's enough. That's enough. Move on. Move on. Move on. Move on. We don't have time. But there is my thinking. Then I get to say to myself, self, you have this feeling. Yeah. That's your feeling. I don't think that's her feeling. That's your feeling, who's been rushing from thing to thing. So self, you're having a feeling that that's enough. And my thinking self is saying, wrong. Wrong.
Yes, you're in a storm of layers of your personality on some days.
Yes, always. But aren't we always? Every time we're touching somebody, I believe that this is true, that we need to be in tune with that. So then I touch, and then I'm forcing myself to act. My thinking is forcing my acting self to just wait until I sense something that is informing my thinking self that I can act differently.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that whole mess of ourselves, and our touch. So that thing about when are we done with the touch? For me, I don't know how it is for you. If I'm supporting the knees, supporting the head, supporting the whatever, and for me, I can get this feeling of, dare I say it, boredom.
Mm-hmm.
That's a feeling. That's not a sensing. I mean, I'll maybe be sensing all manner of amazing things happening under my hands. But when I get that feeling of boredom, then I think it's time to change. How do you know when it's time to change?
You know, there are of course the signs that you get from your client. They're the visual signs of feedback. You can their face calms down, or their eyes are calmer. Their breathing changes. You can feel the quality in the tissue that you're touching. If you're well organized and you're supporting them really well, and they're paying attention too, it can be quite enjoyable. For me, it can be quite enjoyable to literally watch the tissue melt. You just you can feel it in your hands. And then, sometimes it's very, very subtle. And then I like to ask the client, can you feel what's happening? Do you feel that? And occasionally they'll go, huh? Because they weren't really paying attention, right? And then you're in a process of drawing them into what to pay attention to. And that can be distracting from what originally happened, or it can, you're suddenly the experience you were having that you were so sure that maybe the two of you were sharing. Now you realize now you're going to have to enroll them, in this moment, et cetera. So there are those kinds of things that happen. But I remember talking to you and you saying to me, look, when you discipline yourself to do something that you don't really want to do. This is my story of I could sit here all day and this knee or the tissue in the thigh is just, it's not melting at all. And I've been here for long enough, and I'm pretty sure I'm supported pretty well.
There's that boredom thing, like,
you're aware of past moments when this worked for a different client, or I had success with this in another scenario. And I can tell it's not working. It's not producing an effect. And then there's the psychological battle of how long am I going to stay here?
Right.
Am I wedded to this for this? Is this what I've chosen for the session? And therefore we can't change our minds, right?
I'm doing it.
Internal storm that takes place,
Yep. And then how do you know once you stop that because you can't bear it anymore, or neither can they, or whatever happened to happen? Like, okay, that was nice. Now it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know that it's done for whatever reason, then there's that next thing, which is the kind of like what happens before you touch. Where's the next place?
Mm-hmm.
So we should talk about that. What happens before you touch? Okay, before you touch somebody the first time, like they walk in the door, talk, 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 watch, watch, watch,
Mhm.
observe, perceive. Then is that touching? What are you touching them with? So we should,
Yeah, I mean, the way you're scanning with your eyes, or the way you're taking in visual information, or the way the way you're actually looking them in the eyes and listening to them tell you about what just happened, in their day, if that's part of the conversation. To me, there, I tend to kind of separate these ideas, even though occasionally they do happen at the same time. You can be listening to someone talk and be very apparently, interested in listening, but you're really observing something physical about the way they're sitting, or the way I had a musician come from pretty far away for just one lesson for an afternoon, and had, wanted brought in a lot of intent with what they were hoping to accomplish in one session or whatever. And so I had to listen to a lot of background information, and knowing there's no way we're getting to, 10% of this entire story, but still appreciating what they're telling me. And at the same time, just taking in that every change they make, every switch of the legs, every shift of weight is just all over one side of the pelvis, and sort of wading through the conversation. Are they, even if I could walk around this other side of the room and get something off my desk, and do they follow me, and do they shift? They don't. And just making that into part of the way of entering the lesson, or being in the space. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to dictate everything I do, but it's, when those moments, when you catch those moments, it can help you at least be oriented to yourself. I can remember being, certainly when I was a younger practitioner, rushing to touch, right? Because that would indicate, okay, now the lesson is starting, or
right.
that's the domain in which I can remember being trained as a practitioner, and all of the familiar landmarks or moments, and wanting to live there, and obviously being less comfortable with waiting to see what's really going to be relevant for the person.
Right.
Yeah.
I was when you're talking about that thing where you see, where you are watching, and you know that no matter what you do, no matter where you go in the room, it's not going to change. And then for me, this is where the sensing part comes in. I start to feel it in me. Like I almost can't see somebody doing that without doing it myself. It's like trying to teach a tongue lesson,
Right.
teach an ATM tongue lesson. It is so hard to articulate the lesson, and it's the tongue. Like I don't even think it. I don't even, it's already so. That means they are touching me in some physical way. I am being touched by however I have attended to them.
Right. There is a shaping to your attention, to the way you attend, or the kind of rapport you start to build with the person. And just being a practitioner where you are sensitive to those things, you can learn a lot, not by analyzing what you're seeing, but just by watching your own organization change with them in front of you.
Yeah. It's especially terrible on a plane. Have you ever had this problem on a plane with the person sitting next to you?
You can tell if they like to take up space, or they don't, or they're not gonna,
Or they're nervous,
they're
or
nervous.
they're not nervous, or they're looking forward, or they're like, I find myself morphing into them, and let alone their breathing. Like I have to say, that is them, and this is me. I
Mhm.
do not have to breathe like them just because they are breathing like that.
I had this experience recently. My wife and I played in a disco R&B band with a bunch of friends. We did this whole,
Right, right.
and we rehearsed for several months, and we played a couple of gigs in the city, and it was we were very ambitious about it, and it was exciting and whatnot. And then, of course, at the actual gigs is when you're the most nervous, and you're watching your other band members to see, is everybody ready? Like, are we going to start the song? And you get the vibe of the singer is not paying attention to where you are, the drummer is he's ready but nobody else is, and you're trying to corral this sphere of attention because looking out into the audience, I was like, I'm not looking out into the audience. Like you could anyway, 'cause the lights, the lights are coming at you. But yeah, that whole just all the nonverbal energy that's going on between people is so I'll say informative, although in the moment it's just you're kind of in pure reaction sometimes.
Right. So, but I mean, if we think about it, that's the thing that happens before the touch, right? There is a thing that's happening that we are being touched
Hmm.
and touching, which I is part of my interest. Earlier today, one of the things that I did was my daughter and I went to the botanical garden and we taught a class of 12 4 and 5-year-olds
Mm.
about rocks and crystals. And, my daughter is a jeweler and she's all about the gemstones and she has a shop about it. And anyway, they reached out to her. So we were, as we always are, we were very prepared with all of the rocks, and we made little boxes for collections and we put all the rocks in the bag and we did all the things and we set it up. But this was 12, 4 and 5-year-olds.
Yeah. Not an orderly environment, I'm sure.
And they walked in the room and it was on the cusp of the chaos. Do you know what I'm saying? It was on the cusp of the chaos.
I mean, between the kids, but also in terms of your plans for the workshop, also probably having to go out the window.
Yeah, and then the counselors trying to
Calm
keep them
down.
in order, and so already they're like banging their stuff. Anyway, so I could feel, for me, it was kind of hilarious, but I could feel my daughter getting a little like, do I start now? Do I start now? Do I just like this thing that we know? Do I touch them now? Now is it time? Should I? I'm just going to start and get it over with, or now they're not. And there was a moment when she said, who knows the difference between a rock and a crystal? That was it.
That did it.
Just a question. Who knows the difference between a rock and a crystal? All of the hands went up and they were with us. It was that established the connection. It went from no connection
Mm.
to the question, which makes me think about how we ask the questions and how we ask the questions with our hands, with our sensing and feeling, how we ask the questions, and how we wait, as we were saying, for the answers. Because we have to wait. In this case, 12 different 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds had a different answer about what was the difference, but they all knew. In fact, they did all know. They all had a different answer, but every single answer was right.
Right. Wow.
It was just like asking the question with your hands under somebody's foot or wherever it is on somebody's foot.
Yeah.
There's probably more than 12 answers, but you have to wait for all 12.
Well, and I think with certain clients, you may have a background of information. You may know all of your awareness and movement lessons, and you may know you're so familiar with your patterns, and you've studied enough anatomy, and you've gotten this from that teacher and that from the other teacher, and you're sort of ready to succeed according to a background that you have. But with almost every client, you then meet them and you realized that this is a totally different language. This person doesn't share any of that background. You're hoping all of that, of course, comes to bear positively on the experience. I had a client, a new client start who was a man in his 70s and a lot of injuries, both hips replaced, one knee replaced, former academic, professor, retired, falling a lot. Uh, very
All brain.
all lives entirely in his head. Touching him while he stood to help him understand, maybe the most basic thing, because he kind of wanted to know, why do I fall and what can I do to not fall? And so you're just starting at the very basics to show him how he can't rely on his right foot he doesn't, oh yeah, I don't, that's the bad foot. That's, I call her, he has a name for her, so it's often that story. And showing him the difference between the way he's heavy on that side, but he's not supported on the contact he makes with that, all this kind of thing. The lesson I gave him a book on the foot lesson, just for shorthand for practitioners. Very patient, and realized I was kind of happy in the way that we did talk at the beginning, and I understood I'm gonna touch the place on him that he's concerned about, that feels relevant to him, and is the least functional part of what he uses for support. And as I touched it, I realized he can't feel very much. He's got numbness in his foot.
Uh-huh.
And then as I took a marble and I kind of rolled it, along the surfaces of his foot just to find out, and the foot would twitch and jump, but his face would not register like he was uncomfortable. It was all kinds of little responses. And I just got quieter and quieter and more patient, and switched to a board and used that on the foot, and his foot gradually began to change. Not a lot, but I was happy with how little the changes were and how consistent. And afterwards in the lobby, he was sitting there tying his shoes, and I just came out to say goodbye, and he looked up to me and he said, and this was the only thing he ever really responded to in the lesson itself, was after it was over.
So did you ask him, like,
Well, he
did you
turned.
notice anything? Or?
Well, I tried all that during the part
Yeah.
of the session. And when he came out and he was tying his shoes, I came out just to say hi. And he sat there and he looked up at me and he said, "How did you do that?" Because he was suddenly, maybe it was after the session, and he was giving himself a moment to actually take it in, because he really is somebody that lives in his head. He's a professor of neuroplasticity, actually. It was that is his scientific domain. So it's
Oh.
rather interesting. But yeah, just all the ways in which so much of the information of touch that can happen in a session, to the practitioner, there's a lot of immediacy to what you may be noticing. That doesn't mean that's the experience the person is having on the table. And
Oh.
that's another area that we're going to be exploring in this workshop, is learning to get comfortable with that fact, because we know as practitioners, as devoted practitioners, how badly we wish that weren't so.
Right.
And how much we struggle with the fact that that is not so, and that even though you can touch very gently and very accurately, and it doesn't always cross the bridge to relevance very quickly, or sometimes at all during a session.
That's right. And
And you still have to hold the space for,
yeah, and even if we think it did,
even if we're very satisfied.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, or even if we think it didn't.
Hmm.
I've had this experience plenty of times, that somebody came in once, I gave them a lesson. It was, you know, the best that I could offer, and it seemingly had no impact on this person's existence at all, and they went away. And then 10 years later, I'll get a message saying, just wanted you to know that I was thinking about you today because that changed my life, and I've been right.
Yeah.
You know, for the folks at home, we have this thing that Andrew and I have been talking about, that my experience is not the experience.
Mm.
We do have a very fun, probably something that you will all get the giggles about, activity that Andrew and I are going to do.
That we're cooking up for each other.
Yes, that will potentially illustrate this point with humor, or maybe not. We'll see.
I'm sure we'll have a good time with it.
Well, because we,
We're fun.
We've got no ego in it. We're
I know
interested.
this, but we're fun. That's the other thing we're trying to say.
We're fun.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. The other thing I remember talking to you about was when I go to every summer, I go up to Marlboro to work with classical musicians up there. And, I've been going up there for, I think this is like the 17th year. And I realized I
Wow,
mark
really?
it because
You must
my
be
daughter,
old.
I'm old. That's the other thing. It's true. My younger daughter is now 18. And I was like, oh, that's right. She was barely a year old the first time we went there. So yeah,
It was yesterday.
it was yesterday. I'll show you the videos, how much it was yesterday. But, I was totally intimidated to go up there. Intimidated to work with this level of musician. And of course, it simply takes a while for you to realize they're just regular people, right? They do something utterly extraordinary. It doesn't mean that it bleeds into every corner of their physical capacities. One of my favorite evenings was going out bowling with a bunch of musicians and watching one of the most beautiful clarinetists I have ever heard, watching him bowl and just having to walk up to him and say, "Stop, you're gonna hurt yourself. We can't have you killing your arm, and not being able to play the clay." It was so egregious what was happening, and just realizing, okay, you're gonna use two hands to bowl, all right? You're not gonna pick up.
Step off the alley. Step off.
Step off the runway, please. But I had it has taken, of course, a while for me to just get comfortable with the fact that that's the case, and to read that into my anticipation for going up there, and everything else. And I had an experience a couple of summers ago where, very often when musicians sign up for lessons, I know who they are and I can go look at them on YouTube, right? A lot of them have,
That helps. I do
they're
that
not music,
whenever I get a chance.
yeah, these are not music students. They're early and late career professionals. So there's plenty of film on them, and it's of course so interesting to get to do that because you're watching them in their arena, you know.
Mhm.
And I worked with a violinist, probably in her early 30s. Saw her playing a Beethoven concerto. It was just an extraordinary performance. I mean, just unbelievable. Couldn't see very much, to be honest, because she was wearing a kind of a formal outfit that wasn't, it was hiding a lot of her. But there's just something about the way she stood and how she shifted weight and how she drew the bow and everything else. And so you're not seeing an analysis video. You're just trying to get a sense of the person.
Mhm.
And I only was going to see her one or two times also, because I'm only there for a week. But when she came in, the decision I made of, based on what I could see and also what I had seen on the film was how much she held in her abdomen, just how much her abdomen was just this
Ah.
kind of vortex of tone, of effort. And it was there. It was there in the room still. Um, and all I did with her in the lesson was one thing, which was I just simply supported her ribs. That was all I did. I really didn't have to wander anywhere else because what happened and kept happening during the lesson was it was just immediate. It was like, it was the opposite of a frustrating experience in a session, or a session where you have to kind of re-strategize and try this and try. It was just immediate and continuous. And she's very smart. I mean, just very, she's aware that this is interesting to her. And the session was great. I mean, it was relevant for her. It wasn't meandering, or, it just had this sort of immediate relevance. And as a practitioner, of course, I'm not silly enough to imagine that that can always be the case. But when it does
Mhm.
happen, of course, you don't fail to recognize it, right?
Right.
And I was kind of both shocked, but also, of course, pleased that I could just watch some film of her playing, intuit what I could intuit from that, let what I understand about anatomy and what I saw and what she brought just let all that coalesce and have things be that simple too. That was very nice
Lovely thing.
for both of us.
I was telling you about that pianist that I saw in this little performance in my town. In my town, we have this tiny little music venue, and we have a lot of, mostly local people come, and there's music there literally every night
Mm,
and some afternoons. And, I can walk there It's very sweet and wonderful. And so I went this night. There was a kind of just a tiny little piece of a bigger band playing a fundraiser. There was a piano, there was a trumpet, and there was a
This was the
trombone.
brass band, you said, the
Yeah.
Empire Brass.
Piano, yeah.
Okay.
And that the guy at the piano was so beautifully organized. And he was singing also.
Mm.
So he was playing like a fiend and singing his little heart out. And there was not, of course, I'm always looking. Like, I'm always playing that game, like, where's the lesson? What lesson do I want to
Right. You
give?
just
No one is
can't
safe.
unknow what you know. That's right. That's right.
That's right. I'm telling you, the guy, like, there was no place that his breathing, that his voice was compromised. He could go anywhere.
Mm.
The way that he was moving, the way that he was supported on his pelvis, I have never seen anything like it in my life. I didn't stop gaping at the guy all night. The thing was done, and I was just waiting for the guy to come out so I could see this virtuoso move through the room. I was so excited to see this thing. And, people around me were going, let's go, let's go. And I was like, no, I got to see the guy walk. I just got to see the guy walk out, because that was the most amazing thing. It's like a beautiful work of art.
Yeah.
It's like, think about touching a person like that. It's like eating dessert. Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I remember Jeff telling a story about working with like an Olympic level skier. And he was doing some demonstration in a workshop for practitioners, and it was, touching the person's pelvis and the thighs and standing just to see how they shifted weight. And somebody asked him like have you worked with somebody who's just have you ever seen anybody who just has a beautiful, sense? And he told a story about this skier that he worked with. And he was like, it was unbelievable. He said you could just turn the femur just a millimeter and you could just feel the whole organization, the whole coordination in something. It's just like the whole thing is alive. And that's such a powerful, experience.
But the thing about this guy,
Was when he did walk.
he could not support himself in walking.
Yeah.
Not at all. His legs were hyperextended. It was like we talk about our work functionally.
Mhm.
And I am saying this person sitting at the piano, singing, playing, was the Olympic athlete. That person standing and walking was, needed to be on my table. like
Well, it's
once a week for the next 5 years.
in one scenario, they understand so deeply what they need, right? And they can get it. And then in just the next scenario, it all goes away.
No,
Yeah.
it was the most amazing experience, which is a good kind of a reminder about this thing that you were saying before,
Mhm.
that just because someone is good in one aspect, is an expert in one aspect, doesn't mean that they are in every aspect.
Right.
Something that you and I know very well about ourselves.
Sure.
Just because we're just good at one thing doesn't mean we're good at all the things.
Mm.
Not even close. At least Andrew and I know this about ourselves and about each other. We accept it. And also to be on the alert for that, right? So not only to be I think this is the case in every human,
Mm-hmm.
to be on the alert for what is perfect and wonderful in them.
Mm-hmm.
Not to just be only on the alert for the hitch
What's the
in the
problem?
get along, for the malalignment, for the disorganization, because that's touching them also. When we are approaching them with that, let me find the thing that's not working. We are touching them even before we touch them.
Yeah.
With that.
My in the maybe the first year or two after I finished my Feldenkrais training, I was continuing to carpool with my friend Marek. We were visiting the next Feldenkrais training. We were just, continuing our training and driving through Manhattan, which is, a great city to people watch in, obviously. And just driving with him, Merrick is a very experienced physical therapist, and Merrick would help engage me in, like, see that person run across there, like, no hip extension. And I remember being very new to understanding how to see function and saying, what do you mean? He goes, well, look at her, look at that leg versus, look at her left leg versus her right leg. And just the kind of the joy and pleasure of our work, of being able to see, to having that kind of, how that knowledge helps you predict, helps you see, helps you appreciate, helps you have compassion for people when they have certain issues that they often have no idea. They know the experience of how difficult something is, but it's not like the person has they don't have the tools to get themselves out of it. But I always just remember that, appreciating that so much, the ability to simply see what you were looking at, and at least have that knowledge base, and have that as a way to inform it, rather than just guessing, having a vague sense, which we all, who doesn't enjoy just your own intuitive sense of, the way certain people.
And we can lie to ourselves and pretend that it's the truth.
Absolutely.
I can, one of the stories that I tell about why I became a Feldenkrais teacher was for 10 years, I was just a spine therapist, and I ran a spine rehab for people with, complex spinal disorders. We had a big gym, and it was on the second floor. And so it was all windows. And we were a multidisciplinary practice. So we had the surgeons, and we had the psychotherapists, and we had the biofeedback, and we
Got the full integrative package for the.
Yeah. So everybody that came in had already been everywhere else. I just want to say that there were no simple cases. And everybody that came in was going to get a big workup. In other words, big medical workup also. So we would know specifically what was going on. So here's the game. So we would, on the days when the new people were coming in, we would watch out the window, and we would predict what their pathology was.
You'd come in from the parking lot kind of thing?
We would watch one walk from the car, out of the car, close the car door, walk in until you can't see them anymore, because you're on the second floor. And we would say, oh, this person has this problem. That's my thing. I am an expert at that. I was an expert at that in the 80s. I'm just saying.
Right.
That was a long time ago.
I've been people watching for a long time.
Right. So, and we were always right. We would know by the end of the workout. We would know. And I was in the mall one day. I was eating a cookie, and I was watching the people walk by. I was off that afternoon, and I heard myself diagnosing them, what was wrong with them, what their pathology was, based on what I was seeing, right? Because, after a decade or so of doing that, you're not usually wrong. And when you have the proof that you weren't wrong, you get really confident about that.
Right. You get a lot of feedback on how you
get kind of uppity about that thing.
Right.
And all of a sudden I said to myself, what makes you think? See, we thought all the people that moved a particular way because they had pain, and the pain was coming from the pathology. I said, surely not every single person in this mall has pain and pathology. Even though this moment you are diagnosing them with confidence, absolute confidence. I said to myself, wait a minute. What if they don't move that way because they have that pathology and pain? What if they get the pathology and the pain because they move that way? Maybe that comes first. And by the way, that is when I signed up. I found my Feldenkrais training and took it. I was like, oh yeah, that's what that guy was saying. That's true. That's what I'm going to do. But the thing that I'm saying to you, this is my way of confessing, that my bias, because I was good at it, was looking for what was wrong.
Of course. That's what you were paid and trained to look that way too.
Yeah. And I realized that only got me a little ways. in that helping someone achieve their potential, because I was always stuck, as they were always stuck on what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, what I now think about is, okay, you have the thing, you have a body part, and it has a problem. But let's review. You've got 206 bones and 544 muscles and 2 billion neurons. Like, most of them are fine.
It's part of a larger whole. It's been integrated in the way that it's been integrated historically, but it's going to get better because of how it integrates with everything else. It's not.
Yes. So I hope this is one of the things that we can indulge in our workshop together, is about what's actually right.
To see the strengths in the person, to see their, yeah,
Yeah.
skills.
Because we say all the time to correct is incorrect. Oh, yeah.
The I'm trying to think, last summer, my wife and kids had to drive back to New York early in the week. Usually we're there for the whole week together, but they had to go back a little early because of some appointments. And so I had a couple of days, just me up there. And so I had lunch with some of the musicians, and I think it was at the July 4th picnic or whatever. We hung out outside, and mostly it was the election, it was the 2024 election. So people were just talking politics and what was going on in France and all this sort of stuff. And, afterwards, they just, one of them turned to the other and said, "You guys want to go read? You want to go read some music?" Now, these are people that have been rehearsing for 7 hours a day.
Yeah, you're just like, don't you just want to go read a book,
And
not music?
But I guess they were just in the mood. Maybe it was a light day. I don't know. But they said, "You want to go read?" And everybody said, "Yeah, sure." And then somebody else across the lawn who played viola. They needed a viola, so they were like, "Ask so and so." And I said, "You mind if I come? It's okay if I just come and listen?" They were like, "Yeah, sure." And it was just so generous of them, because usually, I'm at work when everybody's rehearsing. I have class in the morning and then I teach lessons the rest of the day. And so, occasionally I get to see them rehearse, but it's not everybody's busy. And so here they just went in and they were so generous with each other. Like the cellist played what he was going to play for this international competition he was about to enter, and it was just, unbelievable. Then they sat down and read the Fauré piano quintet and then the Schumann piano quintet. I mean, they played for 2.5 hours, you know, and they were not trying to rehearse. They were laughing. They were, occasionally, some of them knew that, and these were pieces they'd probably played before, but they might not have been that fresh. So there was the occasional mistakes, and they were laughing while they were playing. It was just so good to see them having fun. It was also where I got to see, they all have these page turner. They all use iPads now, and there's a foot pedal for the page turner. So when they're breaking out their instruments to play, everybody's putting these foot pedals on the floor, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like, what, and then I finally realized, oh, nobody turns pages anymore. They just tap it with their foot. So the string players they don't have to reach and do all that. But at some point, I'm just as happy as could be just listening to them play. It's in this beautiful little rehearsal space where we're actually going to be for this.
Mm.
Um, and at some point, the violinist, she turns to me and she goes, "So when you watch us play, do you just like see what everybody's doing wrong?" And she just wanted it. And I said, yes, absolutely. But I said, I'm not on the clock right now. So just keep going. But it is like a continuous kind of miracle sometimes when you see the difference between how they rehearse when they're in orchestra. During rehearsal, and people sit way back on their tailbone with one foot hanging way out there, and they'll just kind of, they'll play like this, and then at the performance, of course, they're more attentive or whatever. But 6 hours a day, you see a lot of varieties. You see a lot of variation in the way they interpret what they need. And your story about the pianist coming down off the stage and then in his walking. I remember this was probably a decade ago. There was a a pianist who I just had a nice, she was just, she was asking me about Feldenkrais, but she was just so, she was so just kind of, she was from somewhere else. She was not American. And she just had
Ah,
this deep kind of sincerity about her. And there was no kind of, she was just a different kind of personality. And we had a 5 or 10 minute conversation. And she said, I'm going to come to the ATM class tomorrow. It's the first time I'm going. And I said, oh, great. And so I went back home and I looked her up on YouTube.
of
And
course.
it's the most extraordinary playing I think I've ever heard in my life of some. I mean, it was just like one of these moments where I was like, how is this person walking the earth, let alone not known to the rest of the world? And I just remember being completely blown away by what I saw. Just the absolute economy of effort, the aesthetic quality of the sound, the athleticism in the characters, everything about it was just watching her play the piano was just like a revelation. It was like, why
Hmm.
hasn't anybody else thought of this? How to play like that. And when she came to the ATM class and we did the coordinating flexors and extensors lesson, and it was like I was torturing her by asking her to, I mean, it was such a difficulty. It was such a complication. It was like that spine. It was like if you asked me to read Hungarian poetry or something. It was a deep, deep difficulty. And I just remember that feeling of like, how is it that, and is still being in that sort of stuck place of person does something so extraordinary in one domain, doesn't necessarily transfer over to another. Oh, I guess we do have something valuable to show to teach you. All this kind of thing, and the perennial conversation among pianists and musicians when they talk about technique, everybody has this assumption that the better the more correct your posture,
Oh,
the
I
more
know.
the better your playing is going to be. It's very interesting to scratch below the surface of that conversation in which nobody knows very much of what they're talking about at all. Um,
But their teachers told them this, and
of course,
that becomes the law.
somebody asked me this past summer, you know, I know the importance of good posture, in playing. And I said, what I'm realizing lately, and this will be provocative for you to hear, but when people ask me, do you need good posture to be a great musician? Clearly, the answer is no. I mean, the answer is just no, you don't. You don't need it. There's just too many examples of just the most extraordinary people doing the most extraordinary things. They don't have it. But of course, below that question is also, is there some way to make these two ideas make them make sense with each other? Um, and of course, that's the burden we have, maybe. But
Right. My comment in that conversation, which of course happens all the time, because even if it's not musicians, whoever it is,
in whatever domain,
everyone will come in and say, my problem is bad posture.
right?
If my posture was better, I wouldn't have this problem.
They have taken that on. They understand what
Yes,
they're supposed to say.
yes. And I have a whole thing that I teach about the rules that people follow that nobody made. Like, like who made this rule? That if you have this very military posture that looks good in a uniform and your buttons and your medals are all straight, that's going to make you functional in every possible way, except for marching and having your picture taken in the military photo. But I do say that. But I also always say, my job as a Feldenkrais teacher is to corrupt you. I will corrupt your every idea about what's right
Mm,
until you figure out what's right for you. Not my job to tell you what's right.
mhm.
It's my job to corrupt you about your beliefs. And that way, later on, when we've been working together, and they say, wait a minute, I always thought it was like this. And I can say, see, I'm succeeding.
Don't you
I
remember?
am correcting you effectively. Because it's true. And
Sure.
everybody wants to be right. Everybody always wants to be more perfect. Everyone wants to be symmetrical.
Yes.
Everyone wants to be this way because somehow that must mean that they're a better person.
Well, and when you're, for those of us that have been through training like that, where you are taking on something that is quite difficult, you maybe have an affinity for dance, or you have an affinity for the guitar, or whatever it might be, and you're starting to get your feet wet into domains that are deep water, right? And of course, you don't know how to swim yet. And of course, you can also sense you want to get further, and you want to learn, you want to be able to play that or whatever. And of course, your insecurity about where you are is only matched by the the correctness of the advice of the person
That's right.
teaching you. And you may not understand that you've tripped over a threshold, or you may not have met a compassionate teacher, or I certainly remember feeling like, when I had a string of music teachers in my life, and appreciate them all for their different strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. And I can remember the relief at being with somebody who was disciplined in the way they taught, because I just knew that that was going to slake this problem that I had, that I didn't get from my other
Wow.
teacher. And then I can remember meeting other teachers. I remember a single meeting with this one woman who, a friend of mine, heard me play, and she said, my parents know this woman, and she's just like a wizard. She didn't know how to. So this was in high school. I was like 2 years into being really serious. And all I can tell you is that I had this one lesson with this woman, and there wasn't anything about her, nothing about her that resembled any other teacher, except that she was very interested in what I heard
Mm.
and helping. And it was a disorienting experience. The level of kind of compassion that she brought in the session, I couldn't, I couldn't resonate with it, actually. But I cannot forget the experience with her. Of course, I ran away from it because it was outside what I could digest, and it wasn't creepy, or it wasn't, I don't mean to suggest she was, some Svengali or anything like this, but just that, the readiness of a personality, right, to 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 integrate or to take responsibility in that way. It can be,
Do you think that is something that happens with our work?
oh, for sure.
Yeah, so do I.
Oh, for sure.
I think we're trained to be more like that person. And many people are maybe not ready to take it in.
That's right. Well,
Way easier to follow a rule.
that's right. The use of rule, or technique or strategy to replace or to take care of your insecurity, rather than to understand whatever it is that you might need to understand. Get
We
your
ask a lot of people.
to get your questions answered is difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
What did you mean when you said we ask a lot of people?
I mean that we ask a
Oh,
lot of people
yeah,
to take responsibility, to be vulnerable, to experiment, to
to revise what they.
not know. That's right. To edit, to revise, to lay down their certainties. We ask a lot of them in one lesson.
Right.
And
Yeah, if you want to spark somebody's ire, ask them to edit something they've already written. That's a that's a good metaphor. Everybody knows that there's that horrible feeling of, you mean I'm gonna have to look at this again? Like, I don't wanna.
especially if you already worked it so hard and you thought it was as good as it could get.
Right, right,
And then somebody says, yeah, start again,
right.
edit.
It can be brutal.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that we maybe need to bring into the foreground of our work is how do we titrate
Mm-hmm.
what we offer? How are we respectful of the rules somebody's following that nobody made? How do we speak their language? How do we even, can we hear what their language, what their value system is, so that we can touch what we have a hope of
Mm-hmm.
and being touched by, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I'm very much, I am looking forward to having fun up in Vermont for sure. I'm also really looking forward to a group of practitioners that really do want to enjoy working with one another.
Mm-hmm.
That the experience that I had up at Marlborough of just getting to watch the musicians have fun with each other. The music making was at a very high level, and that was really enjoyable just in and of itself to hear people that do something that you like, that's just really high level art is just, of course, extraordinary. But the extra layer that actually made it so special was that it wasn't a concert, and it was how generous they were being with each other, how fun and familiar they were actually having fun playing,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Was there judgment? Not as in, oh, that was better than this or
I
this.
think
Was there
no,
that?
no, and I think they get plenty of that in the formal rehearsal.
Right. I think that's really essential. That
They're preparing for the concert. There's a lot at stake, and there's late career professionals that are there to, of course, mentor younger career professionals, and I think they get that all day long. I'm sure they do their best to make it somewhat healthy, but I also just I know that that's a more charged environment. This was them really just kind of reveling in not having to do that with each other. Like I heard the 4A piano quintet, which I hadn't heard before actually. And it is just like this ocean of just like so, and it was funny because in the middle of it, I think the pianist got like messed up and needed to stop. And they just started laughing about how like it's just like being lost and drunk on an ocean on a raft. Like these
yeah.
spells just keep coming and keep and they were, you know, they weren't being critical of the music. They were just kind of in it in such a beautiful way. They were just inhabiting it and enjoying doing that. And that's very much what I look forward to in what we'll do in Vermont is giving ourselves plenty of space to work and improve at the rate that we need to understand.
And I think we've made a good program
And
for
it's gonna be
that.
really fun.
And I think I am definitely committed to that,
Yeah.
because why not? The other's already been done.
Yeah, I can tell you that after, for those of you, Candy and I worked together in Jeff's training program out in Seattle, and one of the elements that Candy brought in was helping the trainees have a more respectful and less harmful dialogue with each other as they learn to practice together, so they don't tear each other apart. And the framing used was kind of like the rules of feedback. And
Mm-hmm.
around that time, I had done several mentoring groups in New York City, and I just found it such a useful thing to be doing. And the last group I worked with was a group that self-selected. We just wanted the mentoring group to be us five or us, you know, this group. And can you just not let anyone else in because we're working really well together? And I said, great. And the next time we got together, I talked to him about the rules of feedback, and that's kind of how we proceeded. And obviously, I can be persuasive, and I'm sort of I was in charge of the group or whatever. But at the same time, the looks on everybody's faces when I explained how it was going to work were like, "You mean you mean I can work with the person and actually request that we not talk about what the experience was at the end of the session?" Or I can say, I will talk about it with you, but not until tomorrow.
Right. Or
We're going to
I
limit.
want to know about this, but
This is
nothing
my
else.
question. I'm not interested in anything else that you have to say. I just want to know about this aspect of it.
Right.
It was such a, and I got um, the most heartfelt emails from those participants about how important that was, or how rare of an experience that was. And I thought to myself, exactly, I found it to be quite rare myself. That's
Yeah,
what.
because then we really are in service to each other.
Yes.
All of us together in service to each other, growing our work together.
Right. Which is hard enough. That's hard enough to do and find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation.
always. Love to
Um,
talk to you.
yeah, we'll do some more. We'll continue talking, I hope, like this. But in the meantime, I think we'll wrap it up here, and we'll look forward to September. Um,
I know it's been so long. So
been too long.
just being together, just having a group of live people together
Yes.
happens so rarely. For us to actually be together and touch each other in this way is
Being
going
online
to
is
be
amazing,
glorious.
and it just doesn't compare.
I know.
All right.
All right. See you in the flesh soon.
See you soon. Thank you.